Picture this. It's a dark night, August 1963. A Royal Mail train is speeding from Glasgow to London, completely unaware that it's about to become the star of what people would call the crime of the century. We're talking about a plan with breathtaking audacity, planned down to the second, and, well, it was all undone by one single simple mistake. So let me ask you this. How do you stop a moving train with just a glove and a battery? It sounds totally impossible, right? Like something out of a spy movie. But that's exactly how this whole incredible story kicks off. The answer was just brutally simple and incredibly effective. Our story begins on a pretty lonely stretch of track, with something the driver would later call the impossible red light. This was the exact moment the trap was sprung. Just look at this timeline. This shows you the sheer precision of their plan. These guys didn't just show up and hope for the best, they orchestrated every single second. At exactly 3 a.m., they literally covered the green light with a glove and used a simple battery to power up the red one. 3 minutes later, boom, their target is a sitting duck. And then, to top it off, they cut the only phone line out. It was absolute clockwork. Now, for the driver, a guy named Jack Mills, this wasn't just some routine stop. He knew these tracks like the back of his hand. And that signal at that particular crossing, it was never supposed to be red. It was a huge red flag, pun intended, a silent alarm bell ringing in his head just moments before all hell broke loose. So how in the world did a gang of criminals achieve this level of almost military-style precision? Well, to understand that, we've got to rewind a few months and take a look at the mastermind and the plan that would become the crime of the century. Meet Bruce Reynolds. This guy wasn't just a common thief. He was more like a criminal architect. And he did something pretty amazing. He actually united rival gangs for this job. He even brought in the notorious South Coast Raiders because they were specialists in robbing trains. And get this. Their audacious goal was to pull off one of the biggest heists in history without firing a single shot. But here's the thing. This brilliant plan wasn't just built on guesswork or luck. No, they had a secret weapon, a real ace up their sleeve. A mole. Someone deep inside the Royal Mail was feeding them the exact information they needed to turn a ridiculously risky plan into a surefire score. The first tip was a total game changer. You see, the usual high-value packages carriage, the one with all the fancy alarms, was out of service that night, and its replacement, a reserve carriage, M3024M, that had absolutely no security system at all. For the robbers, it was like the treasure chest was already unlocked and waiting for them. And if that wasn't good enough, the second tip was the real jackpot. Because of a bank holiday weekend, the train wasn't carrying its usual load of around 300,000 pounds. Oh no, on this one particular night, it was carrying nearly 3 million pounds. They weren't just hitting a train, they were hitting the mother lode. So, with the perfect inside info and the perfect target, the stage was set. Let's get back to that dark night on the tracks for the main event, the robbery on the rails, a heist that went down in just 15 minutes. The crew immediately swarmed to the engine, but then they hit a major snag. The retired driver they'd brought along to, drive the train for them, he couldn't operate the modern controls. He totally froze. So in this moment of sheer improvisation, they had to use the injured driver, Jack Mills, forcing him to drive his own captured train that final kilometer to their getaway spot at Brightigo Bridge. I mean, this was a frantic race against the clock. The gang had given themselves a 15-minute deadline, and that was it. They formed a human chain, passing down 120 bags stuffed with cash, but time ran out. They actually had to leave 8 bags behind, which was still a small fortune in itself. The heist was a stunning, almost unbelievable success. But as the gang vanished into the night, one of them made a single, tiny error. An error that would unravel absolutely everything. This was the getaway and the fatal mistake. Those were the parting words to the captive train staff. Don't try to get up for 30 minutes. Just a casual threat, right? Something to make sure they could get away clean. But this one phrase, this little warning meant to buy them time, would end up costing them everything. Because when the police heard this, they immediately did the math. A 30-minute head start meant the gang had to be hiding somewhere within a 30-minute drive. That one sentence transformed an infinite search area into a manageable 50-kilometer radius. The police immediately flooded the zone. So the net was closing in, and it was closing in fast. It eventually led investigators to this rundown farmhouse and to the most unexpected, almost comical piece of evidence you can imagine. This is the story of the Monopoly board clue. This just shows the huge difference between having a plan and what happened in reality. The gang was supposed to lay low for days, maybe even a week, but then they heard on their own scanner that the police were searching a 50-kilometer radius. They panicked. The plan went out the window, and they decided to get out of there immediately. So, in their panicked rush, they did a pretty thorough job wiping the farmhouse clean of fingerprints. Then, they paid a contact to burn the entire hideout to the ground, destroying any evidence left behind. But the guy they paid, he just took the money and ran, leaving the farmhouse completely intact for the police to find.
And when police, tipped off by a neighbor, finally raided that farm, they found their smoking gun. It turns out that while they were hiding out, the gang had played a game of Monopoly using the real stolen cash. And in their haste to leave, they'd forgotten to wipe down the game board. It was covered in their fingerprints. It was the breakthrough that cracked the entire case wide open.
Well, the game was over. So what happened to the architects of this nearly perfect crime? What is the lasting legacy of the Great Robbery? The fallout was just immense. Almost the entire gang, 14 out of 16, were caught and sentenced to a whopping 30 years in prison. The driver, Jack Mills, he sadly never worked again and passed away 7 years later. The location, Bridego Bridge, is now known by everyone as Train Robbers Bridge. But maybe the most remarkable part? The insider, the guy who gave them the tips, he was never identified. He just vanished. In the end, a plan of pure genius was foiled by the one variable you can never, ever fully control: human error. From that 30-minute warning to the unwiped Monopoly board. So I'll leave you with this to think about. If you could go back and change just one single detail to help them pull it off,